What's going on, everyone? Today, I want to look at something I find truly fascinating about Elden Ring. Its storytelling and how it sets up the player's journey. Elden Ring, like other FromSoftware games, is known for its rich lore. But what's unique is how the narrative is delivered. There's no traditional narrative, few cutscenes, almost no exposition. Instead, the lore is fed to you through item descriptions and pieces of environmental storytelling. In this video, I want to focus on how Miyazaki and his team set the table in Elden Ring in terms of backstory and how it led to one of the most compelling and rich worlds in the history of fantasy RPGs. In a traditional fantasy story, you typically have a singular hero.
Nice job, hero!
Hey, excuse me, princess.
Often a chosen one of some kind who sets out on his adventure to ultimately take down the big bad or ultimate villain or whatever. I mean, they've literally written books about this, I'm not treading any new ground here. But what I'm saying is, we see this hero and follow them through that journey. The hero is the focal point and the narrative is happening around them. Even if it isn't always them influencing the narrative, from the viewer's point of view, the hero is the center. But what about Elden Ring? While we do play as the chosen tarnish, that's not some sort of prophecy.
And one other, whom grace would again bless. A tarnished of no renown.
We're not exactly a hero, and our goal is very simple: become the Elden Lord. But the thing is, as we travel through the lands between to do this, you start to realize, I'm not really the main character of any of this. And that's because you're not. In fact, the real story of Elden Ring isn't yours. It's all already happened. The game starts you in a world where all of the major events have already occurred. Marika's rise to power, Godfrey's war with everyone, the assassination of Godwyn, the Shattering, the War of the Demigods, all of these monumental events happened long before the Tarnish came to the lands between. Any other fantasy story would have plopped the character down somewhere in one of these big events. Imagine playing during the Shattering, seeing Prime Radahn or Prime Malenia. But of course we don't. By the time the chosen Tarnish sees Radahn, he's a husk, he's brain dead. Malenia is further riddled with rot. Almost no character is in their prime when you come across them. It gives the game a unique tone and voice. You're wandering through the ruins of some other fantasy story, and one that's a little more interesting than the one you're in right now.
A war leading to abandonment by the greater will.
Miyazaki sets up all his Souls games this way. I mean, imagine if we had to fight Artorias at his best back in Dark Souls. But I think Elden Ring was elevated further by its choice of a collaborator, George R.R. Martin himself. Now, say what you want about this guy's writing, and there's a lot to say, but his world building is absolutely incredible, and pairing up with Miyazaki's own unique brand of storytelling was always going to yield great results. From what I understand of it, George R.R. Martin wrote the world and backstory for Elden Ring that Miyazaki then demolished to create the world we play in. So, why was George R.R. Martin the perfect choice? Because the only other piece of fiction I can think of that does close to what Souls games do with lore is, well, George R.R. Martin's own books, A Song of Ice and Fire, aka Game of Thrones. Going back to the traditional hero story from before, if George R.R. Martin was writing a traditional fantasy story, he would have set it during Robert's rebellion. He'd follow Robert Baratheon and his band of allies as they take down the Mad King, and it ends with everybody living happily ever after. Martin didn't want to do that. He wanted to see what happens after the ending. What happens after the good guys win?
You ever make the 8, Barristan?
I don't believe so, Your Grace.
Those were the days.
So, that's the story he told in his books. Robert is now king after his fantasy story has already ended. And, no spoilers, gets a little worse from there. That's the attitude of Elden Ring. What happens after the Elden Ring was shattered and all of Marika's children basically fought to a stalemate? What happens in a world where there's essentially a vacuum for the Elden Lord? What happens in a world that's more or less abandoned by all the major characters? That's where we as the Tarnish find ourselves.
I
offer you an accord.
It definitely would have been fun and exciting to see the shattering or play through the game fighting against the giants with Godfrey. But it wouldn't have been Elden Ring. There would have been long cutscenes, lots of dialogue and exposition, and all the other things that Miyazaki just didn't have to worry about. The Tarnished journey is a lonely one by design, and the reason this storytelling works is because you can have everything in the background and allow the player to piece it together by themselves. It's just more rewarding that way, and it's led to entire YouTube channels devoted to Elden Ring and Souls games lore like some sort of historians. That's how rich and detailed this world is. Sure, you do still have things that happen to you as the Tarnished, and you get a little say in the ending of the game. But at the end of the day, you're playing through a world set in the aftermath of some other fantasy story, and I find that endlessly interesting. Also makes me wonder how they'll handle this hypothetical movie that's been talked about recently. I feel like Elden Ring and the way it handles its lore really only works in the medium of a video game, but given they have this rich lore and backstory, there's plenty of room for them to cover really anything from the story of Elden Ring and still make it a great movie. So all we can do is hope that Miyazaki has his hands in it and they're able to give us something really solid on the silver screen. Well, if you made it this far, I really appreciate you watching. Did you agree with my takes in this video? Do you disagree? Let's talk about it in the comments. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a like and go ahead and follow me and stick around. I've got more stuff on the way and it really helps. Thanks again for watching. Thank you so much for being a part of this community, and we'll see you in the next one.